So Universal Pictures attempts to resurrect one of its classic monsters, but in a very modern take, where what you don't see is far more terrifying than what you do, with the Invisible Man. Trapped in a violent, controlling relationship with a wealthy and brilliant scientist, Cecilia Cass escapes in the dead of night and disappears into hiding, aided by her sister Emily, their childhood friend James, and his teenage daughter. Yet when Cecilia's abusive ex Adrian commits suicide and leaves her a generous portion of his vast fortune, Cecilia believes she can rest easy. However, a series of eerie and paranoia-inducing occurrences begin to plague her, especially when she's drugged going into a job interview by a prescription bottle she lost on the night she escaped. Cecilia quickly comes to believe that Adrian's death was a hoax, and he has begun stalking her. With her friends and family being driven away through psychologically manipulative means, she soon discovers more and more proof that Adrian is not only alive, but has found a way to be literally invisible. When her last hope to expose him turns into a horrific murder for which she is framed, Cecilia's sanity begins to unravel as she desperately tries to prove that she is being hunted by someone no one can see. So The Invisible Man, released to cinemas on February 28th of 2020, came to us out of the ashes of the very poorly conceived and executed Dark Universe, where it was the entire shared universe of the classic monsters that was launched in 2017 with The Mummy starring Tom Cruise, and pretty much ended right there with the entire very poor critical reaction, and the box office that gained back kind of wiped that entire large budget idea out of existence. But Universal wasn't opposed to developing possible other ideas with these characters. In steps Leigh Whannell, the guy who, with James Wan, launched the Saw and Insidious franchises, and had already directed Insidious Chapter 3 and the sci-fi film that got a lot of acclaim, Upgrade. Guy called in by the Universal and Blumhouse executives to kind of court the idea of doing The Invisible Man. Like, what do you think about this idea? What do you think we could maybe do with this? And Leigh Whannell kind of started going around in his head and was like, okay, if you kind of strip away all the other adaptations, all the other interpretations, all the other versions, and just took the core idea of just an invisible man and planted it into a modern setting, where would that type of idea fit? And so he came up with this entire idea of this technology mogul, this inventor, or something like that, this guy, pioneer in optics, develops this entire technology where you can become invisible through holograms and different things in this very highly advanced suit, and he uses it to stalk and abuse a traumatized woman that he's been obsessed with and controlling for a very long period of time, creating a very unique sort of horror environment for this entire idea to be generated and just kind of blossom into something else that's very interesting and also extremely successful, because the film got an immense amount of praise and a whole bunch of box office success as well. Of a $7 million budget, the film grossed over $143 million at the box office. And that's kind of the par for the course for Blumhouse Productions, who very much focus in on doing kind of a $10 million cap in all their films that they produce, with the general horror genre type of stuff they go after, and usually garner back very, very steep box office takes, low risk, high reward type of stuff. And Jason Blum, not everything he produces is the highest grade type of stuff, but a lot of the stuff he produces gets a lot of acclaim, a lot of stuff going on for it, and a lot of success for him. So he's been one of the most prolific producers for genre material over the last several years, and just nailed it so well, getting the right people involved and backing the right projects. And this film absolutely has a lot of the great stuff to really praise for it on such an immense level on this whole film. And with writer director Leigh Whannell being a native of Australia, was very much pleased that they're going to shoot the entire film down there using Fox Studios in Sydney, and just using very specific locations to make it very seamless, to make people believe that everything was being shot and set in North America, in that San Francisco Bay Area. It's very specific because Leigh Whannell had spent a lot of time living in Los Angeles, so he had a very certain feel of how things should look, and finding the very specific location of the certain houses and the certain areas of the entire places that they're going to be shooting in. Found very, very good ways of masking that, making sure everything looked very much like it should for a North American town. Just did a tremendous job there, and just the fact that even Adrian's house in the film was actually 3 different locations they kind of spliced together through the magic of cinematography and editing, and making sure that all 3 locations had a very similar architectural aesthetic there. So they did a very particular type of job to make sure that everything would fit and flow between all these different things, that through the wonders of how they can put together a film, make you believe without question that these are all the exact same location, when of course they were miles or kilometers apart as you'd go that way. But really good type of stuff, just how to make all this stuff come together in a very precise type of fashion there. And just the fact that Whannell does a phenomenal job of directing this whole film. Just the fact that just in that opening sequence there, when you got Elisabeth Moss's character of Cecilia, she just trying to escape the house in the very slow, calm, careful type of fashion there. The restrained way of how Whannell constructs and shoots and everything comes together in the whole sequence. Just all the use of the specific camera angles and the shots, and the way he uses certain shots that kind of elicit a certain expectation for the audience, that you're kind of expecting certain moments where, like, maybe Adrian, his eyes will open, or there's certain things will happen in the background, or something will come up in the mirror shot or something like that. He places those expectations against you to make you think something might happen. They're just the thing in your back of your head that's been pre-programmed into you watching 100 other horror movies. It kind of creeps up on you, just expecting that anticipation for something to happen there. He says he weaponizes those expectations back on the audience to use towards the benefit of the suspense and tension in the film. Does a fantastic job just knowing the genre so very particularly, to be able to use those sort of elements that I've talked about in other things where, like, Wes Craven did a lot of that stuff, and like the Scream films really did hit on those beats and really found a very specific way to use all the little tropes and little kind of things you expect and anticipate in a horror film to kind of jump out and do something at you, twist them around, turn them on their head, and use it towards a different angle, a different benefit to your entire experience watching the film. Whannell nails that type of stuff in the film so very well. He just has a very restrained way of plotting out and conceiving, constructing a scene like that to pull things back. Even like the use of sound design in the whole film is exceptionally well done, where he kind of had this piece of music in that opening sequence that he ended up not using because he thought the sound of the waves crashing outside was a much stronger sort of ambiance to the entire scene to create a certain sense of tension to it. Is very specific about finding these different ways to find the right elements, to draw that suspense, draw that terror out of you, the anticipation of what's going to happen. He found these very good ways to string along and make it very taut, to make a very effective type of film in these regards. Everything's focused on such a calculated way of drawing out the suspense in the whole film, such deliberate choices, bring up all these different fantastic camera movements, all these fantastic little things they do with the camera, because you kind of have to be aware when you're making the film about a character you cannot see. You have to use the minimalism, the negative space to your advantage, to have the camera move in certain places to be suggestive of where the Invisible Man might be hiding. He might, because you don't need to use darkness in the film. That was one of the things he was very specific about. We don't have to hide anything because the guy's already invisible. You don't have to have heavy shadows everywhere. He'd be hiding out in broad daylight and you won't see him. So they had to be very particular about using the camera in certain creative ways to keep that idea in your mind, that the camera is almost aware of things that the audience knows that the characters are not aware of. Such a very specific type of thing to make sure all those things come together in the cinematography of the film. It's just an immense, effective, beautiful type of thing. I love the whole use of the richness of the warm and cold colors in the film. I like so much that you got certain things, whether intentional or not. There's certain things like you've got James's house, and you got like the entire restaurant later on lit very warmly. These are environments where Cecilia feels like she should be safe. She should be comfortable. She shouldn't have much of a fear about anything, but the other environments like you have when you go into the mental hospital or the certain other things like the police station, certain places where things aren't safe, where things are a little bit more coldly lit. You have a much more different aesthetic there where you can kind of have a little bit more overt sort of a sense of tension here that things have gone against her where she's not in a safe sensibility. All these different things just kind of work off in such a very subtle type of fashion to kind of inform the audience of certain moods and certain feelings you can have. And then Whannell can kind of move around with that a little bit, kind of push and pull against the expectations here and there, kind of twist things around a little bit. They kind of play up on your tension or your nerves, stuff like that. Very good type of stuff. It's the same cinematographer and Stefan Duccio that he worked with on Upgrade, as well as the same editor. Really good type of thing to make sure that you're working with the same people, know how to shoot and edit the way you want it to be shot and edited. So it's a very good type of thing, and be with people you're very much trusting of to make sure the film comes out the way you want it to. And definitely people to be trusted with implicitly in this whole film is the spectacular cast that was assembled for this whole thing. You got to start with Elisabeth Moss here, who has been a very highly acclaimed and award-winning actress on television with *Handmaid's Tale* and *Mad Men* and a couple of film roles as well, but she puts on a goddamn performance that is just incredible in this whole film. The fact that she was so willing to be so headlong in the entire immersion of the character, the look, the feel, the expression of the character, the thorough sensibility that you have to dig down deep inside of you to get all these complex feelings and the physical attributes of the character here of Cecilia. It's such a crushing level of a performance in this entire film. What she portrays, what she conveys, what she projects out onto the screen, just the depth of what she goes through to create this character and show the suffocating fear that she has of Adrian. This guy has been so all-encompassing in her entire life, just controlling her every thought, her every move, every little thing that goes on in their lives. He was very much deliberately in control of every little meticulous detail. That's kind of destroyed her own sense of self in the show, has damaged her to that extent, where she has to try to slightly rebuild herself, but she's almost so paralyzed with that entire film that she could barely even leave James's house to get the mail to begin the whole film. It takes these little steps to kind of try to build herself back up to a certain point where she can try to recapture a sense of her own life. But how that all that stuff kind of creeps back in, that all the psychological damage done to her by Adrian starts to work again against her when all the little things start creeping up and the paranoia starts building up and these little things start to twist her mind around where she doesn't entirely have a confidence about what she believes is exactly happening. She just evokes such a powerful sense of empathy in the entire film for the audience here, because once these things start happening to her, they're just so adverse and so terrible. The horror just builds up in the entire film, just seeing the worst stuff that keeps happening, where the invisible man here of Adrian starts building these wedges across the people that she actually trusts the entire film, the people that can give her some kind of comfort, kind of give her some kind of safety in a certain way, starts driving them away, pushing them against her. All these different things start taking things away from her piece by piece to kind of strip her back down to the entire thing where she is as vulnerable as he used to make her. And just Elisabeth Moss's performance in the entire film, just like the gripping pain and psychological torture, just so textured across her expressions in the entire film. The twitches she has and the certain body language she has later on, like when she's meeting again with Tom in the psychiatric place, and see all these little things that she's doing in the entire thing where she's just having these physical reactions to the entire thing. It's not just emotional, but it's physical type of stuff that she's going through in that sequence. But how you also see in a sequence like that, despite all the things that she's gone through and all the things that she's still grappling with, she still has a wherewithal. She still has a cunning intelligence when she seems to have this sort of rage-filled fit and everything and throwing all the stuff off the table. It's a plan, because she grabs the pen out of the briefcase knowing that she's getting something to have a plan later on. All these little things, she's very calculated in what she's doing in these moments where she's not losing her own sense of being, all these different cognitive things that she could possibly be doing for her own safety. I love these little things. It's a smart piece of screenwriting and direction, but also how she portrays these moments to show that it's deliberate and to inform you of how things are going down later on when she's in that shower in the entire cell there, where you know that based on how she acted in that previous scene as a very deliberate action, she's not actually going in there to commit suicide. She's doing it as a stage type of thing to draw Adrian out and have the entire thing to fight back against him. It's very, very smart ways of having a forethought in how you're going to portray things when a lot of things are shot out of order, when you're doing production and everything like that. Now, nothing's actually all shot in sequence. So you have these wonderful type of things with Elisabeth Moss knowing how to find that emotional headspace as they're going along in production and shooting things out of sequence and making sure that all flowed very much on a linear type of fashion, how she descends to a certain degree, but also still continues to make sure that she has that focus, but also the damage that she goes through in the art film further informs her actions moving forward. Is very intelligent acting from an extremely talented actress here with such a very smart screenplay with a lot of different complexities to play through the entire thing with different themes, different emotions, and different psychological states you have to move the character through and grapple with all these different things. It's a very, very captivating, powerful performance she puts on. Just, there's never a missed note, there's never a false note with this performance. And I can say that for everyone in this entire cast. Everyone does a fantastic job. Love Aldis Hodge. I knew him from the TV series Leverage, which is a nice, fun show, but he puts on such a tight portrayal here of James, this guy who's this wonderful father, a really rock-solid type of cop here. Just, he radiates such a confidence on screen, just a sensibility. It has a gravitas, a screen presence that really just brings something that's both very comforting, but also very confident, very sharp type of thing, balancing those different things of being a very comforting friend and father, and also being that cop, the guy who can charge into a situation, have a very solid sensibility about that, but also grapples with a lot of different things when things go a much deeper, darker type of thing with what's happening with Cecilia here. Just grapples with some very complex reactions to the entire film, but generally just brings forth such an honest and measured type of response to so many different things in the film. Just feels so goddamn good. Just, he does the subtle things, the small little things in the film so extremely well. You just feel this guy's talent just coming through so beautifully on screen. Leigh Whannell was so very appreciative of getting this kind of guy with this kind of talent and not being fully discovered what he can really do on screen, sort of an untapped potential at that point, and it very much kind of grabs something very special with his performance. And Harriet Dyer as Cecilia's sister, Emily, has a very nice portrayal in this whole film. She's only got a couple of scenes, but she has that very sort of good strength about her. Just sort of stern but kind of short to the point type of thing she has going on in the whole film, where she just stands up very strongly, very, very straight about different things in the whole film. When things go in any type of direction here, she has a certain chemistry with Elisabeth Moss in the scenes that they have to work with, and all these little things that just creates a very strong component in the film to work off of. I like her very much in the whole film. And I really like Michael Dorman as Tom Griffith, the brother of Adrian here, because he's got this sort of twitchy and wormy sensibility about him so much. Guy's shaded with this certain sense of suspicion on him. It's like he tries to come off as genuine, but he's got this feeling, this expression on him the entire time. Whereas Cecilia says later in the film that he's like this punching bag for Adrian. It feels like he does have some kind of psychological damage towards him that makes him look like he is kind of worn and kind of beat up and stuff like that, where he's very much a spineless type of character. He probably has a lot of the same manipulative sensibilities like Adrian has, but he doesn't have the backbone to back it up. And so he's got this sensibility where he's kind of pushed around and probably kind of manipulated here and there, and doesn't have the ability to kind of push back against or anything like that. So he's very much a spineless sociopath in that type of way. He'll go along with any type of plan because he's probably greedy or stuff like that. He doesn't really care about anyone else. This is a very interesting way of how he's portrayed in the whole film, and just has this sensibility of being kind of pathetic and a little bit sleazy. And you really get this sort of amoral quality from the character without him being assertive or aggressive in the whole thing. He's got that very subversive sensibility in the whole film that makes him very interesting to watch what he's doing and where his sort of intentions lie every time he comes up on screen as the executor of Adrian's estate and stuff like that. All these little things he starts playing with, the legalese and all these little things, kind of seeps in, and the little sleazy qualities kind of come out in the whole thing. Very, 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 very good actor in this regard. Very, very good. And getting Oliver Jackson-Cohen in here as Adrian was a very good find. He's very, very good. Again, he's got like one real scene in the film is all the way at the end of the film. But you've spent so much time building the character up through Cecilia's trauma, all the things that she's been through and what she conveys to everyone else, and everything else that happens to her. What he ends up getting to do once he's on screen to do something is a very goddamn good performance. And apparently he was on set very often, working with Elisabeth Moss. They kind of work these ideas out and kind of work together, because his character is still being portrayed on screen by a guy in a green keyed out suit and everything like that for the CGI work. So you still have a sensibility about how things are working and how the character works in the mentalities of what his psychology kind of dictates. So they kind of worked a lot of things out between Cohen and Moss there to kind of work these things out and kind of figure out where the idea of the background of these characters went through all these little things. It was a very special type of thing to have actors working to that extent to figure these things out, where, again, Cohen probably works maybe 2-3 days on the film, something like that, as a guy actually on screen outside of a suit and stuff like that. But he put the effort into it to work with that lead actress, to get that whole thing for when he does show up on screen, you have all that weight of everything that's going on in the film, all the weight of what she's been through and what Adrian means to her in that very destructive type of fashion. And once you see that wonderful performance he puts on, where you get that sensibility of the false compassion, the false front he puts on the whole thing, where he wants to be measured in what he says and try to pull her back in and kind of manipulate things just a tad bit here and there. And you can see in the subtleties in those little moments there where they had that conversation at the end of the film, the little hand on the leg, the little expressions he has coming in very close, very subtle type of stuff that's extremely effective in the film. Little sense of control. You see that he starts to assert a little bit at a time of that whole thing. Excellent. I mean, that's Leigh Whannell's direction in a lot of ways, to see how the whole thing is constructed, how it's approached, but to see how the actors immerse themselves into those moments and work on such a synergy in those moments as well, to make sure you feel that they have this shared history together. It's wonderful type of stuff to see how that comes together, and Jackson-Cohen does an excellent job in those moments to really kind of bring something out that pays off what the entire film has built up to see how this guy, without having to do anything extremely overt, it's all very subtle, very under the surface type of stuff, but it plays so strongly with the context of everything else that's gone on in the film and everything that's in the context of Elisabeth Moss's character of Cecilia. It's wonderfully played and hits on the right beats, and the entire thing is just magnificent. All the acting in this film is on such a magnificent level here. You got a really solid performance here by Storm Reid, the girl who plays James's daughter. She's wonderful. She's absolutely fantastic. This whole thing, she does a wonderful job of it, having a lot of rapport, a lot of really strong qualities, and very just natural, very natural and genuine on screen. Everyone just hits off such a fantastic thing, and it helps again to have a very strong screenplay, to have very dimensional characters in this film, to be involved with these characters, to be invested in what they're going through and seeing what things are developing, to have that depth of the characters written into the screenplay, but also brought to the screen by such fantastic actors, makes you invested in them so much that when the bad things start happening, when the terror starts coming in, when the bloody stuff starts flowing, all this terror starts building up and kind of inflicting these characters. You feel so much for what they're going through. And that's what terror really is on screen. That's what horror does so well. You feel so much emotion for them. And that's such a testament to all the things that go into creating amazing characters on screen. But in making an Invisible Man movie, characters and great actors are only part of the equation, because you've got to employ some very special visual effects in this whole film, and they did a fantastic job with it, with the special effects company Cutting Edge stepping in the whole thing, which also worked on Upgrade for Leigh Whannell, and just did some really interesting type of things, having a mix of high and low tech type of stuff. Just like some things where they needed to move a door, certain little things in the whole film, just tying a piece of string to it, and just low tech type of stuff going on. But obviously there's a lot of CGI, because they did a lot of fantastic, interesting, and pretty cool type of things to make sure that they had very, very gripping sequences in the whole film, making sure that they could have an Invisible Man interacting with the people on screen, with the guy in the green keyed out bodysuit, stuff like that, but also making use of a very elaborate motion control camera system, where they'd have like planned out beats, where they kind of have Elisabeth Moss there and some of the other actors going through specific motions at specific intervals to plan things out and plot them out, so they could have different passes on the whole thing between just the actor, but also the guy in the green suit to key everything together and move it together in post. So it's like they had some very exceptional sequences done with this whole thing. First thing in James's house, in the kitchen and whatnot, with a knife and all these different things. But also later on, where she's bursting out the entire sanitarium there. It's a very long sequence. They did phenomenal work to have all these actors hit all these different beats, the entire sequence, and have all this stuff come together in such a seamless fashion, which is very exceptionally impressive. Seeing all this stuff being done mostly in single takes, and have all this little editing tricks they also had in certain places, where they'd have like a whip pan shot where it's like Elisabeth Moss coming towards frame, but once they whip the shot around, now it's their stunt double, and doing a lot of very clever type of things in camera to make sure that they could move the entire sequence along in very, very fluid fashions. It's a very good type of thing, seeing how they put all this stuff together through pre-planning and using all these different elements of visual effects and editing and cinematography to put all these little elements together, where, yeah, you could have done the whole thing where they had a lot of different coverage on different sequences and have things cut back and forth and make it a little easier, but having the fact that Leigh Whannell had this sort of vision to play a lot of things out in just long takes and have that work out with the visual effects and everything like that, which is very complex, but aids the film in such a powerful type of way to see how all this stuff moves forward, and just like kind of movie magic again a little bit. You know, there's computers and stuff like that involved, but it's such very impressive sequences to see all the stuff come together and have all the stuff with the design of the invisible suit, kind of creating a whole thing where all these little cameras are taking thousands of photographs every second and creating these holographic illusions around the whole thing was the entire intent behind it. So it's very, very sophisticated, but you didn't want to get too far along with it. You still want to have a little bit of a sensibility that you could buy into it just enough for the entire idea to kind of be believable enough on screen to move the entire story around. Good type of stuff, just the entire construction of the vision and all these elements of special effects come into play here. Did a fantastic job with all that stuff. And as I alluded to earlier, sound plays a very important part in a horror film to create the overall sense of tension and atmosphere in the whole film. And composer Benjamin Wallfish here, who had done Blade Runner 2049, both It Chapter 1 and 2, Lights Out, a lot of really good things, Shazam as well, so he's got a lot of wide range what he can bring to a film. He does a really excellent job with this whole thing. I really was very impressed by the overall mood that he injected into the film. We had these very subtle cues that kind of twist up the tension here and there and just build up these very sort of orchestral and electronic mixes of these very verbose, intense cues that kind of drive the terror forward when everything gets much more packed with adrenaline and all these different things get into the utter sense of danger in the entire film. Really weaves together such a fantastic, really damn good just underscore for the entire film. And he's got this really nice sort of piano melody in the whole film that Leigh Whannell is very appreciative of, that he kind of laid it in here and there, and towards the end of the film, when you get up to that final sequence there, it starts to build up and gets very much into a crescendo, so kind of like this sort of little motif that kind of sprinkles in the whole film to kind of build up towards the end of the whole film is a very particular type of thing. So it's like a very good type of score, and Whannell was very, very pleased about everything Walsh finished put together for the whole film. It was a really good score, and just listening to it on its own has a lot of good, interesting qualities to it that just it kind of soaks you into the whole thing, whereas like it's a very particular special thing when watch the whole film, you're absolutely loving the whole thing, you're very much gripped in the story, and the score carries you so strongly through things that when it gets to the end credits, you don't want to turn the film off because the score is still gripping you into the ambiance of the entire film. You're yourself feeling the overall sense of the film as you're going through the end credits, listening to what Wallfish put together for this entire score here. Just did a wonderful job of it. I thought he did just a top-notch type of piece of work here that has modern sensibilities, but also harkens back to classic horror type of feelings in it here and there. So he's got a really good handle on a lot of different subtle things going throughout the entire score here. It's just the fact that the Invisible Man, that it always impressed me. It impressed me for the first time I saw it in the theater. It impresses me now, almost a year later, watching it again, getting very much into all the nuance and the qualities. They're just right for a horror film. You don't have an excessive use of jump scares anywhere. It's all very much earned type of stuff. They're always building up that suspense, that kind of feeling in the whole film of paranoia and the dread here and there, all these little things to get you up in under your skin, and also again involved with the characters. There's so much focus in on the quality of the storytelling throughout the entire film to understand what's going on and feeling the emotion of the entire film. Just as such a key thing, that there's a lot of cheap horror films out there that don't get a lot of these qualities. What works with the craft of a horror film so much? It takes so much skill and so much patience to craft a film like this, to make sure you have all the different qualities working at the peak levels here with such great talent involved with it. I mean, just the psychological horror that gets inflicted upon Cecilia just amplifies the emotional peril of the whole film. I just like so much that the film follows its character threads. There's a certain point at the end of the film where you kind of reveal it's Tom under the mask there at James's house. Certain films could just end there as like, oh, we faked you out, kind of Scooby-Doo ending and whatnot. It's not who you thought it was. But it's a smart, very smart film that's not going to go for the cheap thing. There knows there's much deeper elements to explore in this film and follow through on. They're much more important to the satisfaction of telling a really damn good story here, so it follows it through there. It follows it through to Adrian and all these little things, and the mindset that Cecilia is so locked into because she's been through the relationship, this damaging relationship, this controlling relationship with Adrian. She knows what she knows, and she's known it the entire film. So it's not going to have some cheap ending here that kind of like just to fake out the audience. They keep locked into that logic of the characters there that's been proven right time and time again throughout the entire course of the movie, and they follow through on that. The film is just a smart horror film. Now, I've seen some people like, okay, Invisible Man, he doesn't make any sounds, so it's like, is there something about this suit that's not explained that makes him kind of soundproof or something like that? There's little nitpicks some people kind of pick up on the whole film, but I've sat through this film and not really had that running through my head so much. It's not affected me in any type of way to enjoy the storytelling of the film because I'm locked into the characters. I'm locked into the emotional state that this character of Cecilia is going through, and the terror and the inventiveness of the entire filmmaking process the film employs. Now, if that kind of knocks you off from the whole film a little bit, kind of knocks it down a little bit, that's your thing. But even like with my friend and commentary partner, Steve Frazier, kind of brought up like, you get a little dramatic irony there by the film actually being called The Invisible Man, and you're spending like the first half of the film having Cecilia being doubted upon and not being fully revealed that you are involved with an invisible man stalking her. So it's a little bit of something there that you could kind of put a hook into the entire film, but I watched it originally in the theater, and I was just absolutely gripped. I was actually thoroughly, deeply involved with the whole film. And the ending of the whole film is just very interesting, how you'd have that reaction to what she does, where she comes in and has this whole sit down with Adrian, and you see it's like maybe she's trying to give something here, maybe she's just trying to sort him out in a certain way, and you finally find the entire duplicity, the deception that she employs in the whole thing is almost turning everything against Adrian. All the little things that he employed to lure people in and manipulate them around, she does the exact same thing back to him. He uses his own suit against him towards the ends of what you call his murder. Straight up that, and the very complex sort of moment there between her and James is like, is very interesting. Did she sacrifice something there of her friendship to free herself from this man? Because as long as this guy's out there, especially now that she's pregnant with his kid, it's a very complex thing to kind of keep running through your head as the film ends. And Leigh Whannell had a very special, particular way of beginning and ending the film. Because her first moment in the film is her opening her eyes, and the final moment is her closing her eyes. A very particular type of thing. They didn't want to have some sort of prologue at the beginning of the film showing the relationship. You want to have a very particular thing where she opens her eyes into this sort of reality, this cold reality that she is in, to try to free herself from, and then at the end of the film, when she actually is free, she closes her eyes, and it's sort of a moment of relief. So it's a very specific, nice little thing he does there to bookend the film. I think it's very inspired, a very subtle type of thing that he kind of alludes to in the commentary for the entire film. I just think the film just nails a lot of really fantastic type of things, just like it's crafted the way a horror film, I feel, should be crafted, with subtlety, suspense, deep dimensional characters, a very good storytelling overall with emotional base that is very strong and very relatable as well. Does a really good thing just overall. He puts this film together at such a fantastic level. I really appreciate this film so much. I just really much am absorbed into this film on all the different levels, and very impressed with all the vision they put forward into the film and all the tools he used to make that vision happen. I thought this film was just really fantastic. I just really like it so much. Again, I've only seen it 3 times, twice properly, and then once with a commentary track, but it just impacts me. I just think it's a wonderful film. I think it's a really scary, just taut type of movie. Really inspired type of stuff. It's not the absolute best thing ever, but there's a lot of goddamn talent involved with this whole film. I just like to have your thoughts put down below about what you feel about this film. And we have been doing Saw commentaries. Back in October, we started off with the first 3, myself and Steve. Started doing these Saw commentaries on this whole thing. So, well, I know if you guys are very much interested to check it out and see if there's more interest for us to continue onwards with the rest of the highly convoluted but highly entertaining franchise to really get into more about that stuff. So guys, definitely let us know about that stuff, and we will be back with other great stuff, with more reviews, more commentaries, and the return of the retro video series soon. So guys, thanks so much for being around here, liking, subscribing. The comments are always fantastic. Share the links around. We'll be doing great stuff, and thank you for being involved with this channel. So guys, thanks much. Take care. Bye-bye.